This is an interesting argument. On one end, you know, refers, I think of the Twilight Zone, because last week it was essentially a motion put forth that was going to get through without having staff look at it. But this week it seems it's okay for staff to look at it. So if it got through last week, then the whole rationale used this week wouldn't have applied. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the assumptions based on the numbers to want to assume that there's inequality or it's not equitable, there's not sound information. So that in itself, to make the case that it's inequitable when first the variables are not there, the sound information is not there, Ernst & Young themselves say that information is incomplete, and then after we have this assumption that there's this great savings out there, that itself, which is incomplete. I think the third assumption is we heard loud and clear Mississauga pays into the region, but we never hear how much have they taken out of the region? How much have they benefited from the region? So over the last 20, 30 years, everything that they put in, what ratio are they getting? So what return on investment are they getting? I'd like to hear that story. So if we go into this and say, let's look at the policing, because this is where this is where we spend our costs. Well, let's look at everything that we do. And I'd like to see for the last 20, 30 years, who's benefited from the region? Who's actually built out? Who's actually developed? So, you know, we talk about what's put in. You know, it's the added story, you know, we put this in, but then after you take more out. So that is part of the narrative. So I just think that if we look at this in isolation, there's so many other areas of expenditures where you will want to find savings. What I don't see as a conversation here at this table is where do we find efficiencies? As a regional council, it's not about picking areas where we think benefits us as a municipality. Well, we spend more here, so let's look at this area. Let's look across the board and look at efficiencies. Let's look at policing. Let's challenge him to do efficiencies. We just hired a police chief. Allow him to get into his job. Mayor Brown talked about it. He talked about we got a chief who uses digital media, who uses technology. Let's allow him to come next year and see where he's at. So I do think it's premature for us to go on this, but I do think if we're going down this path, then we have to look at this holistically and look at everything that we do here at the region, but also look at the return on investment. Look at what Mississauga takes out here. So I would look at the media and say that as well. So look at what Mississauga has taken over the 20, 30 years. How have they developed? How have they gone out? It was Brampton taxpayers who subsidized that as well. So here we are today, and understanding that Mississauga is looking for their savings, but I think the conversation should be where can we find efficiencies as a whole as council. So I can't support this referral.